once it starts streaming, will you send another link in the chat, Flando? Just double check here.
Okay, you guys should be live.
All right. Hello. Welcome to the, this is the Visiting Athletic Director Suite at Bill Snyder Family Stadium. Derek Young is with me from K-StateOnline. You know him, you love him. Flando is back here mixing everything up behind the camera, making sure everything works. We sounding okay, Flando? Doing all right? Okay. All right. Well, we are going to be diving into everything that happened today in K-State's 35-31 loss to Arkansas State, which obviously was quite frustrating. Not the way anybody wanted to start this. If you are watching this, by the way, live right now, you can go ahead and send us questions. We'll make sure we get to those later on. We're going to dive into all of our points. Flando has some clips queued up from the press conference as well that we're going to be able to get to, so it's going to be good. You want us to just go get right down and dirty into this, Flando, or you want to wait until we send out an actual link here?
I'm going to send out a link right now on the board.
Okay.
First.
Cool. I'll just wait until you do that to really get into it in earnest here. But I'm curious. Got a mask here. Not wearing it right now. We've already been close to each other, so I guess at this point, not much that we can do. Flando's actually the only one here wearing a mask. So Flando's doing a good job over there. We are not. I got a special mask just for today that was supposed to be better for my glasses.
Iowa State lost.
Don't feel like it was great. That's a great topic, DY.
We'll start off with that.
That's a great topic. Iowa State lost by 17 at home to Louisiana, and it should have been worse. Now, I was not watching the game, but I know that it was an insane interception. Did you see that pick?
I did not.
The dude had, ripped it away from the Iowa State receiver at, the 10-yard line. Shocker, Brock Purdy throwing an interception. And then they didn't cash it in. They didn't score. I think at that point it was 14-10, or maybe they got a field goal out of that. Anyway, my point being, could have been worse. Even for Iowa State. Could have been worse. Now, 11-win team last year, DY. That's a pretty good Raging Cajun team. Sun Belt was good today.
Big 12 was not.
Fun Belt was all about it today. They got it done. But that is fun, and that's, I know everything sucks today.
What's the better team in the Fun Belt, Louisiana or Arkansas State?
I mean, I'd have to imagine Louisiana just by the fact that they won by 17. I don't think Arkansas State is bad. We'll have time to talk more about that.
I don't think they're this good either.
I don't. They should not have won. They should not have won the game today. They deserve to win. Don't get me wrong.
They were the better team.
But this is not a game that they theoretically should have won. I don't think that they are a great team necessarily. But at least Iowa State did lose. That should take some of the sting away from this. I mean, the other part about that, too, is relatively speaking, you think about the expectation level for Iowa State versus the expectation level for K-State this year. I mean, that's why that game is getting more run. In a lot of ways, the fact that this game for K-State was on Big Noon Saturday, right? Big Noon kick, whatever they call it on Fox. The fact that Iowa State was playing on ESPN and lost by more, and they were a ranked team, they had a number next to their name, 23, that helps take a lot of the spotlight away from this game. So at least, the headline reads, Iowa State gets beat, Sun Belt goes 2-0, as opposed to K-State gets beat. So, yeah, I know Gus and Joel were here, and it was still a big deal, and a lot of people saw it, but Iowa State took the brunt of it.
They certainly did, and at least, I guess Kansas State and Iowa State can also say they played football today. The Big Ten cannot, the Pac-12 cannot, Baylor cannot, Oklahoma State cannot. Hopefully they can next week, and hopefully the Wildcats will have a better performance in 2 weeks. Flando, in terms of live, are we still live?
You're still live, but I don't know what URL to use, because neither of them are working for me.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's a little problematic.
So let's see. If I go to the
see
the old K-State Online.
K-State Online will find a URL because
YouTube. Let's see what happens here.
I see us.
Well, I can see us.
Live recap live now. Oh, we gotta wait for the ad.
I've got to watch an ad for a video game first before I get to us.
Hey, making us
And we're live.
We're here.
It's just go to the K-State Online YouTube and
we're here.
Can Kurtz share the link?
Let me see.
He can.
I think I can.
Yeah, Kurtz has it.
I just go to the K-State Online YouTube
okay.
and just
Click
copy
share.
the URL. I didn't even click share. Just go copy the URL that pops up. So let me go tweet this.
And then we'll get into the bread and butter.
That's right.
And how the babies
we've got that coming. DY, why don't you tell the people a little something about K-StateOnline here?
Right now, we will be doing a lot of, obviously, post-game recaps, and hopefully this YouTube live show is actually something that we'll be able to do after each and every home game this season. We'll have a lot of interactivity. We'll be taking questions at some point. We'll probably dive into the bones of the game and how it didn't go K-State's way at first. But in terms of the road games, could be a little bit trickier. Obviously, with all the details and just, I guess, protocols and procedures of how each game is going to go when it comes to media credential-wise. Tomorrow, we'll probably start diving into recruiting coverage, but we'll also have analysis via podcast and via written content, and we'll start to get some of that contributions that everyone's come to expect from, and Kurtz knows these two guys are two of the best when it comes to that, KSU_fan, and of course Chris Nelson, also known as Nelly, will get their insight into what they saw after they dig a little bit further into it. Fan was actually at the game, so he'll probably want to rewatch it first before some of his observations, but when it comes down to it, Kansas State didn't do enough, and eventually you're going to get great analysis over why that wasn't enough and what absolutely just went wrong for the Wildcats today.
Flando, you want me to post the link on the boards, or do you got that?
I got it on the boards.
Okay.
And on that same thread, I said they can ask questions there, on your Twitter, or on the YouTube Live. So they got
all right, perfect. So we'll just get into it right now. We'll take it from here because I've got it on Twitter, so we should have more of you guys joining. First of all, let me just say, a bright spot today, silver lining. Best hair in the game right here. Both of us. We talked this week about how much we pay for our haircuts. It's a lot of money. So, this is why we do it.
Combined over $100.
This is why we do it. All right. Derek, there's a lot of things that went wrong today with K-State losing 35-31. I mean, you can take your pick as far as where you want to start with it. I think for me, at the end, and this is maybe just the bad taste left in your mouth by how it ended, but Jonathan Adams just going nuts. 8 catches for 98 yards and 3 touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown with under a minute left. K-State just could not stop him most of the game, and the defense really, after about mid-second quarter on, was pretty bad. Arkansas State was its own worst enemy a couple of times. That's the only reason they didn't score on virtually every drive after that. But, K-State struggled on the ground. The offensive line was beat up today. They had some guys missing for all kinds of different reasons, but they just couldn't establish much of a running game, which is the identity of what this team wants to do. Skylar Thompson definitely missed some throws. We're going to talk a lot about that today. I've been one of the biggest, most ardent Skylar Thompson supporters,
Absolutely.
but the guy he missed a lot today. Threw some great passes. It was really a lot of what's a microcosm of his career, some dimes, but also missed a lot of throws. And then just sloppy all the way around. 8 penalties, a couple of missed field goals. So I'll leave it up to you, DY. You're the expert here. Where would you start in terms of what went wrong today?
I guess I'll start with the secondary and how it went wrong and how they couldn't defend Jonathan Adams, of course. He didn't even have 100 yards receiving, but he did have 3 touchdowns, and that was worrisome. And I guess I want to start there because I think that's a problem that could creep into the future because we're talking about how they couldn't defend them, obviously, with any of their corners. A.J. Parker probably had the best luck, and I think that's something that we probably come to expect.
Yeah.
Lance Robinson at times where he struggled. I think we saw Keandre Thomas struggle a lot in the first half, and he didn't play as much in the second half, I think, because of it. So those are, situations and issues that could come up in the future, but the real problem for me is safety. They already had one safety out today that didn't play that would have been the backup to Jerome McPherson, and that was Ross Elder. Chris Kleiman commented on that post-game that Ross Elder would have been that guy when Jerome McPherson had already went down, in the first half today. But with Elder not there, they had to go to Ryan Hennington. Chris Kleiman had a lot of praise for Ryan Hennington because of how much he enjoys him as a person and stuff, but that's going to be a tough pill to swallow, his performance, because it's going to probably be one that he wants to forget. We didn't see Tyron Lewis. That kind of probably tells you where he is at on the depth chart. Brock Monty was the backup to Wayne Jones, and Wayne Jones got hurt at safety. So now you're wondering if Oklahoma, you only have 3, possibly only 3 healthy safeties, really, when it comes to it'll be Ryan Hennington, Brock Monty, and Tyron Lewis, who didn't even play today. So I think my fears start and end at safety because it's not just a problem today. I wonder what that problem looks like in 2 weeks.
Well, it's not just also that they were bad for the most part today, but it was, I think we expected that the secondary was going to be, if not a strength, at least a net neutral for the team. This was not expected. It was kind of jarring because you thought the secondary would be pretty good. Last year they were.
Yep.
Van Malone and Joe Klanderman, the two guys that now have more responsibility this year on the defense and within the team, on the coaching staff. I mean, they were guys that coached up the secondary last year. You felt like they were pretty good. And today just was not that at all. And I'll admit, I mean, I thought Arkansas State was going to be tricky. I knew that they had good receivers. I knew that Adams was supposed to be a pretty good player, but man, especially with one of those, I mean, Arkansas State was down one of their better receivers today too. Like, I didn't expect that. I certainly underestimated what Adams was going to be able to do. And we have this question a lot. I've seen a bunch of the questions that you guys have asked us after this game today, and a lot of it revolves around how good is this kid? Why didn't you double him? All of that. I'll say this, like, I've seen everybody saying he looked like an NFL receiver, and I agree, he looked like an NFL receiver today. I truly hope that's the case.
I hope so too. I don't want to rush to that judgment.
Yeah, because if
year.
not, I mean, you're going to go see Oklahoma and Charleston Rambo, and you know that they're going to have some receivers, and everybody, Tylan Wallace, you still have to defend here in the Big 12, and there are going to be a lot of dudes that you're going up against the rest of the year. So the hope has to be that Jonathan Adams is a legitimate NFL-type wide receiver because he was unstoppable today.
Yeah, and I might be mistaken, but I don't think he had this kind of impact versus Memphis, so that probably worries you a little bit more. I think he was probably still good in that game. I'd have a hard time thinking that he wasn't, but I don't think he had 3 touchdowns and was virtually unstoppable. There was a few catches that he didn't get that he looked like he should have had as well, and I think that one-hand grab for the touchdown that got called back as well would have been – I think he got a touchdown drive or touch on that drive anyway, so it's not like you would have 4 touchdowns. But there's some real worries there, and we talk about how we underestimated, what Jonathan Adams could do against Kansas State, and I wonder if we didn't overestimate a little bit this Kansas State secondary, because now that I think about it, there's a lot of new faces. Keandre Thomas, new face in the secondary we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Lance Robinson didn't play a ton last year, other than late, and he still wasn't a starter at that point. Wayne Jones did play a lot. Jerome McPherson did play a lot, but at a different position. And then we saw a number of guys today that didn't play much at all last year, if at all. And it was Ryan Hennington, it was Brock Monty, it was Will Jones. So I wonder if we're not just underestimating Jonathan Adams. We may have, and I hate to say this, but maybe we overestimated some of these guys we just haven't seen a whole lot of.
I think it's fair. I think there was probably a lot of that across the board today in a number of different spots. And really, I remember thinking midway through the second quarter, hey, the defense actually is playing all right. I mean, it was the offense that you felt like at the end of the half left some stuff on the table. But if you go back to the drive chart, and somebody tweeted this at me. I wish I could shout out whoever that was. But at about the 8-minute mark of the second quarter is when this started. It goes touchdown, fumble in the red zone. When Arkansas State, they drove all the way down inside the red zone. They had that bad fumble. Missed field goal, touchdown, punt, the 1 3-and-out, touchdown. So you're talking about 4 touchdown drives, a missed field goal, another red zone opportunity, all in the span of 7 drives from the 8-minute mark of the second quarter on. So the defense really did struggle.
They struggled. They were actually pretty good early. I think you're right on that assessment. And I was really impressed with the – it's kind of switches the camera up a little bit. I was really impressed with the defensive line early. I thought that they really impacted the quarterback. I think they almost had 5 or 6 – they might have 5 sacks in the first half. So they were affecting the quarterback and making the quarterback uncomfortable. And I think that's important to do. And I thought that was one of the keys, because I thought you do that, and these quarterbacks they'll make mistakes. And you saw, Will Jones had an interception at one point and a block punt. He might have been one of the few bright spots as well, but he also had the pass interference that hurt a defensive drive as well. So it was a little bit of an up and down. I thought the defense started out early. They got a 3-and-out to begin the game as well. So I thought they started out pretty flashy, did their thing, but as the game went on, they really just started to wear and tear a little bit. You wonder if that has to do with them having to dig a little bit into their depth more than they necessarily wanted to, and you saw the result of that, unfortunately, on the field, for lack of a better thing to say.
Yeah, now, something you pointed out, and I didn't notice this as much, but I know I saw you and Cole, who was in our group text, talking about this as well, and I trust you guys in your opinion there. I didn't pay enough attention to what Wyatt Hubert was doing on plays where he was not affecting the quarterback, but I know you had mentioned, like in the run game. And that's one thing, I mean, as good as Arkansas State was throwing the ball, they really were able to get whatever they wanted late in the game on the ground, too, which really hurt. You felt like Wyatt Hubert wasn't his best necessarily in the run game today.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and he's really good at it, so don't get me wrong on that. And he still had some very impactful football plays that NFL scouts will probably love. He still had those in this game. But at the end of the day, I think all he really seemed interested in doing, and maybe that was the schematic point of it as well, so I don't know if we can necessarily fault him, but he really wanted to pin his ears back and just go full bore at the quarterback. And sometimes that meant him vacating his position on the football field, and that's where they ran, and that's where they had success. So there's either someone behind him not filling that gap like they're supposed to do, or Hubert probably vacated an area that he necessarily probably shouldn't have. So a lot of questions on that side of the ball. If I may, I will bring up, well, because we're still going to do it. It's still bright spots on the defense. We'll still bring up bright spots on each side of the ball. I thought Justin Hughes was the best defensive player on the football field today for Kansas State in his first game back since shredding his knee. So, and I'm not sure it was close. Will Jones had some more flashy plays. I think Justin Hughes was the best player consistently from the beginning of the game to the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I remember thinking when he had the play where he batted down a pass, where he leaps up, dives, and bats down a pass. Like, okay, well, that's good to see. That's encouraging to see based on his knee, because it sounded like he was still trying to develop some confidence. He definitely talked about that in the week leading up to the game.
Drew Wiley was good too.
Yeah,
Drew Wiley was good at defensive tackle.
And this was all without Khalid Duke was not playing today.
I think that hurt too. I think so, and we don't know why Khalid Duke didn't play actually. So that's probably still a mystery at this point. But there were some guys that played today. I don't want to call out any names, but they would have been better having the starter in, and that's just at the end of the day, that's an obvious statement by me, but that hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's going to be that way the whole year. You're going to have to deal with that. And that's a part of Chris Kleiman's message after the game. That's going to be there this year, but you still have to go out and make plays. There's no real excuses.
It's the same for the other team.
Yeah. And Arkansas State, I mean, we have to point Arkansas State was without a lot of their key cogs today.
On their defense, so that doesn't speak well to Kansas State's offense.
Which, yes, brings me to the offense. So Skylar Thompson is the easy, like, lightning rod subject here. I've said the ink blot test a bunch. People look at him and see two different things. I think the bigger problem today is just that they weren't able to run the ball. I mean, it starts up front. K-State had 97 rushing yards and under 3 yards per carry in this game, and it's obviously an offense that at North Dakota State really thrived on running the football. Last year thrived on running the football. They just couldn't really get it done today. And I think that's due to a number of different factors, but mainly that you are breaking in so many new young offensive linemen. Breaking
in new offensive linemen, and probably played some offensive linemen that they weren't going into this game expecting to play. Noah Johnson got hurt in the second series, and I think that hurt them more than they thought that would hurt them. And they moved Ben Adler to center, and I don't think that was necessarily working. So they went to the third-string center, and Hayden Gillum, who's a walk-on from the state of Kansas, and he was actually pretty good. That's the surprising thing. I actually liked what I saw from Hayden Gillum, the third-string center.
So you did you noticed it when that happened in the game. I actually didn't. I didn't know that until Chris Kleiman said it after the game. I did not realize that.
Yeah, and he actually did good. And I think Ben Adler's problem actually was snapping the football. I think we saw some errant snaps, and I think that's where some of his issues lied. And then it kind of shuffled the offensive line around. Dawson DelForge got in because of it at guard. I saw Logan Long got a few reps in at left tackle, and he was a tight end a year ago. So a lot of moving parts on the offensive line still to this day, too. It was Cooper Beebe's first start of his career, and his first half was pretty rough, if I'm being honest. But the second half, I actually thought that Cooper Beebe started to respond pretty well and played a much better half than the first. Obviously, I don't know if that resonated on the football field in performance for Kansas State, and that's the unfortunate part. And you talk about the running game and how it struggled. It's probably a stat that probably embodies that is, I think, at halftime, Harry Trotter had 11 carries for 15 yards, and you're not going to beat a lot of teams when your primary running back for a half is barely averaging a yard a carry.
Yep, and I know there were a lot of cries for more Deuce Vaughn. He is a bright spot. I mean, he looked good today, man. You can see the burst, like, just instantly. The second he touched the football, you're like, okay, yeah, that guy looks like he moves at a different kind of speed. Reminded me somewhat of, like, when we first started to see Josh Youngblood last year, and you watch him move, and you're like, all right, that's an athlete that's on a different level than a lot of what is here. There were 71 yards from scrimmage today for Deuce Vaughn and a touchdown. He had a big reception for 24 yards and also got a steady amount of carries. I think there are some things, and he even talked about it after the game, he can learn when to cut it upfield as opposed to continuing to bounce things outside on some outside zone stuff. But in general, that does have to be a bright spot today, looking at what Deuce Vaughn did.
It was definitely a bright spot, and I like to use the term that I think you used there too. I said it with Josh Youngblood last year. As soon as he had the ball, it looked different than anyone else that touches the ball.
Yeah.
When Deuce
Just ask Gus Johnson, man. He was gushing about that kid all day today.
And when Deuce Vaughn gets the ball, it looks different, and that's a good thing. When I say it looks different, it's a good thing, and that's what I saw from Vaughn. Not only did he probably miss some cuts, like you said, and well, he said in his post-game interview, not bad for him too. His first game of his Kansas State career, and he gets a podium game. That's, I guess you want to call it,
right?
And gets to meet with the media. But I thought also, and I don't know if this will necessarily go away because I think it has something to do with his stature and who he is. I think he can make people miss very easily in the open field. We saw that a lot today. I bet it seemed like the first guy never really got him very often, or at least made someone miss at least once every time he touched the ball. But I also kind of, saw a trend, and this isn't super concerning. Like I said, it probably has more to do with the size. It doesn't take a lot to bring him down either. So that'll probably be.
He's 5'5", he's 5'5", he's a tiny guy, but he's definitely a weapon that they can use. One question I saw pretty commonly from people is about Jacardier Wright, who did not play today. I know Chris Kleiman mentioned that he has had an injury that he's been battling. It also sounds like maybe some doghouse kind of a thing going on with Jacardier Wright. Were you surprised that he didn't get a single carry today?
I was. There's two things that surprised me when it comes to
Tyler Burns didn't really
Burns got
either.
one carry.
Yeah.
And they gushed over him all fall camp. So part of that, I want to say what doesn't make sense because they do what they think is right, and that's fine. I guess it just doesn't really coincide with what we heard from the coaches for, 3 or 4 weeks now, that Tyler Burns and Harry Trotter together were going to get the lion's share of the carries, when really it was Deuce Vaughn and Harry Trotter. So Tyler Burns getting one carry was probably more surprising to me than Jacardier Wright not seeing one snap. I still think it's a little surprising that we didn't see Wright at all, though, because I think Chris Kleiman literally said that you would see 4 running backs. You would see Burns, Wright, Trotter, and Vaughn, and we saw 3.
Yeah, we did. This brings us to Skylar Thompson on the offense. I mean, man, what a... Just again, I said it earlier, but it felt to me so much like a microcosm of his career, where there were some high highs. Touchdown pass that he had to Phillip Brooks to start the game was a dime. The pass where he hit Sammy Wheeler, I believe it was on the game-tying touchdown drive to tie it up at 28, was a great play where he stands in pressure and delivers that ball. He put great touch on the touchdown pass to Briley Moore in the end zone. But there are 4 or 5 throws where you look at it and say, man, I mean, that's potentially 14, 17, 21 points, whatever you want to put on it, that K-State left on the field because Skylar was just consistently, it seemed like putting a little bit too much air under the ball. And he wasn't missing by much, but it was enough. And it was certainly enough. I saw you guys in the Twitter mentions. It was enough to bring all the Skylar haters back out of the woodworks. But, deservedly so in some instances today.
Yeah, microcosm of his career is probably a good way of putting it because the more difficult throws he was making, like you mentioned, the one to Sammy Wheeler while under pressure, Wheeler's crossing over the middle into the left part of the sideline. The first touchdown of the game to Phillip Brooks was, like you said, it was a dime. That was a great throw. And then the throws that would have been touchdowns that were much easier throws than those, he's missing. I think he missed 2 or 3 different touchdowns to Sebastian Taylor.
Certainly one to Sebastian Taylor.
Yeah, I think it was 2. I think one was just a little overthrown. He got his hands on it, and probably is catchable, but made it a difficult catch when he was literally wide open. And there was another one, a longer throw. It was to the other side of the field, where he just throws it on the wrong shoulder of Sebastian Taylor and makes it a completely difficult catch again. A lot of that happened today. Malik Mills' great one-hand catch should have been a touchdown.
Yeah.
Skylar made that a difficult catch as well. Malik makes the highlight reel so they can sustain the drive and get points, but that play alone should have netted them 6 points. So it is a microcosm of his career. He makes the throws where they seem very complicated, and you're like, okay, he's going to be good today. And then you give him 10 minutes, and there are some easier throws to make, and he doesn't execute them. So the inconsistency of Thompson throughout his career was on full display today. It didn't disappear.
Yeah, I would say today felt a lot like last year. I mean, to be honest, it didn't feel like there was a major step forward. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of things happening there. He had a lot of pressure in his face. He's got new offensive line. He's missing a bunch of wide receivers today. Nobody wants to hear excuses. I'm just giving you the context, really, that we were relayed by Chris Kleiman also after the game, which included this. And Flando, I'm going to have you play this clip if you've got that queued up. But another thing here is that Chris Kleiman said Skylar Thompson was actually banged up in the game, and I believe it occurred on the play where he was running down near the goal line, flipped up, and it was kind of an awkward play. But Kleiman says that he was definitely banged up today.
I think everybody could see after the play at about the 2-yard line where Skylar got hit, he struggled to move around after that. It wasn't a severe injury. Obviously, he was able to play, but he didn't have the same mobility as he typically does.
All right, so I actually didn't notice it during the game. I didn't sit there and think to myself, oh, yeah, Skylar's hurt. I thought, hey, that looked awkward. I wonder what's going to happen. And then you kind of forgot about it.
Right.
But it does sound like K-State had a lot of things in the quarterback run game schemed up or designed today that they weren't able to use, which makes sense because when the running game traditionally wasn't working last year, what did we see them do a lot of? They started running Skylar. The Oklahoma game, they ran Skylar quite a bit. So I can buy it and understand that it did take out a chunk of the playbook today.
I can buy it. I'm with you. That completely, I guess, evaporated from my memory. That hit, it was very awkward. He basically flipped in the air and he almost landed in the end zone without, touching the ground. But I think he actually landed on his head. So that was part of the awkward tumble and the awkward fall that he had. And I don't think that I remembered that, but at the same time, you could tell that maybe altered their plans moving forward because they didn't have a lot of moving Thompson on the run or getting him out in the open field and using his legs. And he said that that's something that they actually had a plan to do a lot of today, and not having that ability, Skylar's mobility really, I guess, to kind of turn that on its head. And I guess, and I've heard, some of the response and some of the feedback, and I'm sure you have too, Kurtz, is that, with that being the case, why didn't we maybe see more Will Howard then? And I do, kind of throw up the stop sign a little bit. This kid's never played a football game before, so maybe they didn't want to, they weren't ready to throw him into the fire. He did his 2 or 3 snaps. Hey, they were a good 2 or 3 snaps, but I don't know if they wanted to fully embrace moving on to him at that point. But I think it is a fair question that if Skylar's mobility was, altered that much, then maybe more than a couple plays might have been suffice. Maybe give him a full drive and see what he can do.
Yeah, I get it, and I saw some questioning going on of the explanation there as to why do it for just 2 plays. And when it happened in the game, I mean, we were all sitting there like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. This is very interesting. I understand if you look at it and say, why is that the explanation? That seems weird. However, I'm also not going to sit here and say the right move was in a tight game in the middle of the third quarter, was it tied at that point, to throw Will Howard as a true freshman into his first game action is the right move there. When Skylar Thompson would go on to lead them to 10 points to take the lead late in the game, I don't think you can say the right move was to bench Skylar Thompson at that moment in time and put in Will Howard. I know there are a lot of you out there that, you have your minds made up about Skylar and you just want to see K-State move on, whatever. But I think if we're having a fairly reasonable discussion about this here, that's not the right move to throw Will Howard into the fire at that point.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I don't think it. I think that's kind of pressing the nuclear button a little too soon. When there's, it's a tie ball game. Will Howard's had 2 snaps his entire career. I don't know that there was enough there to kind of pull the trigger on him. Now, with that being said, and this isn't me saying that he should play more, but I will take that throw to Jack Stanine as a great sign moving forward. Yeah. So I feel good about that.
Yeah, and actually, Flano, I should have you play this clip too, and I should have done this beforehand, but if you do want to hear the specific explanation that Chris Kleiman had about why they went to Will Howard, here is what he had to say after the game.
I asked Mess and Colin, because the kid was trying to fight through it, and I said, hey, and we had so many quarterback run things scheduled to be run, and Skylar couldn't do it. So we just weren't calling them, and they were teeing off on us. And I asked him, I said, hey, let's just put Will in, give Skylar a little bit of a rest. I didn't mind seeing Will. I just want to see him anyway, because he's done some really good things. And so we just said, hey, we're going to start. If it was going to get to a 3rd down, we were going to put Skylar back in. We wanted him for 2 snaps. Make no mistake. Skylar's the quarterback and he's the guy. We just wanted to see Will try to.
And so a key part of this too is he says at the end of the clip, like we're not making a change at quarterback. The unquestioned starter is Skylar Thompson. There's no quarterback controversy here at all. It was a weird, very interesting moment, but Skylar is going to be the guy, which again I would tell you is still unequivocally the right answer for right now with this team.
I mean, I would agree with that. I think something we haven't really made this takeaway from this, and I don't think anyone has, and I haven't even thought of it until now. But I guess the takeaway is they did go Will Howard instead of Nick Ost. When Coach Messingham said earlier in the week if it was late in the game they would go Nick Ost, and they didn't. They still went with Will Howard.
Well, it tells you everything you need to know about how they feel about Will Howard.
Yeah.
Like everything that we have heard and you've relayed about what the coaches think of what he's done so far and how he's picked things up. Like they like him. And even Kleiman, I thought, DY, the way Kleiman answered that question, all I did was ask, was an injury or Skylar being beat up the reason that we saw Will Howard? That was all the question was, and he went on for a good couple of minutes talking about Will Howard and how happy he was with him getting in and taking a shot and getting back up and throwing the pass that he did to Jackson Dean. He kind of gushed about Will Howard and took that opportunity to do so. So you can see that they do feel really good about where he is going.
And to be fair, this discussion is happening because he said that, we had a lot of QB runs scheduled that we couldn't run because Skylar's mobility was affected from that hit that he took. And to be fair, Will Howard wouldn't have been the greatest substitute to run that stuff. He's not going to be as mobile as Skylar Thompson would, so he just can't come in and maybe run at least as effectively as they envisioned Skylar running. So he wouldn't have been a great fit for maybe that type of game plan anyways.
And the last thing I have down on my sheet here is things that went wrong, the major storylines of the game. Just the sloppiness in general, which we've covered a lot of that, but, 8 penalties for 85 yards. There were some penalties that definitely hurt in there, and that was, if we go back to last year, something that we saw quite a bit of at times. This is, I think, a bit of a different situation because no spring practice and COVID and all of that. It makes it easier for those sorts of things to happen, but you combine that with missing a couple of field goals, Blake Lynch going 0 for 2 before he hit the one to put K-State up 31-28 and misses that weren't even really close. Just some uncharacteristic things that really did hurt. It was sloppy.
Yeah, there are a lot of unforced errors. One that actually kind of immediately jumped out to me when you brought up the penalties was the Jackson Dean one, and I thought that was
true.
That was a bit of a crusher because that was a really, really good play, and he got the block. One of the few blocks that he actually executed on. I thought the fullbacks were actually pretty rough today in terms of their performance, and he finally had a good one, and it, I forget what the play was, but it was a very successful play.
It was Sebastian Taylor, like a catch and run, right?
Or it might have been his end around or something.
Yeah, it was the end around. You're right, it was the end around.
It was Sebastian Taylor, and one of the better plays of the day, and it gets called back because of his unnecessary roughness and taunting, after the play, which he deserved. You look at that replay, and he was asking for it.
I thought it was pretty awesome, Jax, but I guess you can't do that. I like my players with a little bit of that in them. But yes, that was something that hurt. And Blake, hey, kudos to Kleiman for going back to Blake Lynch late in the game to kick that field goal. I guess, maybe not. Maybe in hindsight you say the right move was to still go for it and try and score a touchdown because you lost the game. But it did take some guts to go back to Blake Lynch and some trust in him, and he did hit that field goal at least.
Yeah, well, we'll go with each of our players of the game on those 3 phases. In special teams, I guess I'll immediately say Will Jones. He blocked the punt. I'm sure that's probably an easy answer for the both of us. Defensively, I kind of already hinted at it. I like Justin Hughes the most today. I don't know if you have a different answer on that.
I'd probably stick with that. Maybe like you go like honorable mention. Drew Wiley was pretty good today.
The defensive tackles both were good. Eli Huggins had a good game as well. Offensively, that's going to be probably a little bit of a tougher one. You instantly want to say Deuce, but outside of 2 of his bigger plays, his yards per carry, yards per touch weren't extremely impressive, even though it looked good while he was doing it. It's probably Sebastian Taylor, to be honest, or Briley Moore.
I think I would go Sebastian Taylor. And Briley Moore, I love the guy, and it was awesome to see him play. And I think, you can see the trust that they have in him already. They have that big 4th down, and they go straight to him on a tough throw. That was another pretty tough throw from Skylar to put in there in a clutch situation that he made. You can see the difference that having Briley Moore in the offense makes. But Sebastian Taylor, to me, stands out as the biggest story on offense because he had to step up. There were receivers down. There was no Wyking Gill, no Josh Youngblood, Porter, Weber. Those guys were out. And this is somebody that we've heard about for a long time. Started to show some potential last year, and he was a guy that I said coming into this year, like, I just need to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
And not only did he have, let's see, I've got the numbers here. He had 4 catches for 98 yards, touchdown, right? And then he has the end around, a long run. But he was running open. I mean, he should have had 150, 160 yards and another touchdown or two. So, like this, he was just running open the entire game.
Yeah, he could have had 2 or 3 touchdowns. I was going to say he probably had good numbers, but they were probably a third of what he should have had.
Yeah. So, to me, he's easily your offensive player of the game today. Honorable mention, Briley Moore, 6 catches, 54 yards and a touchdown, and then Deuce Vaughn with the 71 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. So, before we get to questions, any other thoughts that you had to empty out here, the notebook?
You know, I guess we'll quick look ahead. You know, you're supposed to play Oklahoma in 2 weeks. They're kind of depleted as well, probably a little bit more so than Kansas State. So that's probably going to be a factor. But I imagine both are going to be in a better position, hopefully, in 2 weeks. And there's no disruption at all, of course. But, you know, what you saw today certainly makes you a little bit concerned for what could happen in Norman in 2 weeks, just because we're so used to seeing the high-powered offense that the Sooners have with Lincoln Riley, you know, at the controls, especially when it comes to their quarterbacks and the way they can sling it around the field. And what we saw from the secondary today certainly doesn't inspire a lot of hope.
Does not. Here is a question from Spud Webb.
Ooh,
I don't think it's that
the
Spud
real
Webb.
one.
Not that Spud Webb. How many games in will it take to realize Trotter isn't RB1?
I mean, I'm not going to try to bag on anyone, but I think some of those hard conversations, or at least discussions, probably need to start taking place sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and to be fair, like Trotter did, he had a nice series there when they tied the game up at 28.
Yep.
He had some really nice runs. And again, the offense, a lot of that's on the offensive line to be able to open some of that up. I mean, he's the guy that they go to when they're trying to run power stuff, right? And that's what we've seen this team struggle with the most of everything that they try and do offensively the entire Chris Kleiman era right now. And I think some of that is that they just don't have the whole infrastructure to be able to run some of that. So I will just take a little bit of the heat off of Harry Trotter in that aspect.
And I think that's appropriate, and I think he's probably running some stuff that's maybe more designed for Tyler Burns, and maybe Tyler Burns wasn't completely available today, so maybe something happened on that one carry he got.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a question mark for me why we saw so much Harry Trotter. Harry Trotter got kind of a load even more than I think we saw from James Gilbert at times last year. So
Yeah.
It's a little bit surprising that he was used as much as he was.
It's actually a good question to ask on Tuesday about Tyler Burns, now that I think about it. Laura asked a question at the end of the game, why is K-State throwing passes 20 yards shy of the end zone? Skylar did throw it to about, the 15-yard line to Phillip Brooks there at the end of the game. I don't know that I have a great answer for that.
I guess if you're at the 40-yard line, I'd like to see them just kind of put it in the end zone. I agree, but I guess you like your chances otherwise, apparently. I guess the question I had more wasn't necessarily the strategy on the play. It was maybe the personnel, because it's the end of the game. Your two most explosive players probably on the day, aside from Sebastian Taylor, have been Deuce Vaughn and Malik Knowles, and neither Vaughn or Knowles were in on that play. Now,
Did Knowles? Did you feel like Knowles had tweaked something?
To be fair, Knowles maybe had tweaked something, because I don't think he was also back on the kick return, because Vaughn was back with Brooks on the last kick return and not Knowles. So, and unfortunately, that's something we've come to expect from Malik Knowles. You just never know what's going on with him in terms of his health.
I say, if we're talking about disturbing trends, that would be another thing if that is something that's legit. Because that was the problem all year with Malik Knowles last year. He's so explosive when he's actually out there, and you saw the OBJ catch that he had today. Just got to keep him out there actually on the field. Laura, another question. Why didn't we double number 9, which is Jonathan Adams?
Kind of went into that. I will say this. When your secondary is kind of getting beat up to the entirety, I know take their best player away is the strategy or the thought here, and that's the reason for the question. And maybe it is something that they should have at least tried. I'm not going to vow to be the smartest defensive genius in the room here at all as well. But, you're really going to leave someone else vulnerable in the secondary. And it was our secondary already vulnerable because you're playing walk-ons at safety that probably they wish they didn't have to use at that point.
So this question, I know a lot of you feel this way from Saul. He says, can we finally be done with Skylar? I'm going to answer it this way. I would just tell you that from what we know about how the coaching staff feels about him and the way that they have completely bought into him being the leader of this team and being the guy, it will take a lot for him to be unseated as the starting quarterback. I think in particular when you do have a true freshman as the guy behind him. Nothing against Nick Ost, but I don't think you're benching Skylar Thompson to bring Nick Ost in as the quarterback. This is about whether or not you'd go to Will Howard. I think the combination of both of those things, even though they love Will Howard, I think it would take an awful lot for Skylar Thompson to lose that job.
I would agree. And I'll never say never, but you'll have to. They're going to have to see probably more prolonged struggles. And to be fair, there was still some bright spots from Skylar Thompson today, and I don't think that he necessarily lost the game. Obviously, I don't know if any one player necessarily lost the game, of course, but he didn't do enough to win it. And if that continues, then I understand the concerns, but I don't think that they're going to pack up and abandon ship after one game.
Another question about the end of the game from Alex. Why call the timeout on the first down with 30-ish seconds left when the clock stops to move the chains? Why not take a shot before the chains are set and then if incomplete, gather the troops? I'll be honest, there was so much happening when that was going on at the end of the game that I was not totally up to speed on what happened there. I had someone texting me that the first pass actually was incomplete and K-State caught an unlucky break by the fact that it was not called incomplete because the clock ran. It was like a 9-yard gain.
By Sebastian Taylor.
Yeah, so there was a lot happening there. I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I know what they're talking about, and I don't know that it really necessarily had a big impact. I'll probably have to go back and rewatch it because it's a little bit harder to keep up with that in the press box, but I don't know if that necessarily had a huge impact on things. They did call a timeout after a first down, and I know some people have viewed that as like a golden rule. Don't use one of your timeouts after a first down. The clock's going to stop anyways. But I don't know if that's a timeout that they necessarily needed at the end. Maybe it gets you one more play. And I don't think it's 100% should be the rule, but I am kind of in the boat that, you get a first down, you don't need to call a timeout. But I think at that point there were 17 seconds left and he still had 2 timeouts. So I'm not sure if it was really that crippling.
Yeah, I guess the way I'm viewing it, deck chairs in the Titanic. I mean, the thing was going down anyway at the end there. I'm not sure that it would have made much of a difference. But I understand. You want to maximize your chance to win. Curtis, a question about Messingham. Look, another guy that has a lot of haters out there, certainly from the fan base. There are times where I think the most frustrating thing to me was at times trying to pound that, and I shouldn't even say A-gap power, like I know what the hell I'm talking about, but just trying to utilize the power running game in between the tackles, sticking with that for a long time when you had receivers running open most of the game, and that seemed to be where you were having success offensively.
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit somewhere in the middle there. I understand the frustration of what you saw unfold today with Courtney Messingham's offense because they didn't nearly have enough output, but at the end of the day, at one point in the third quarter, they were still averaging 3.5 points per drive. And then I think they scored 10 points after that. So I'm not necessarily sure when you look at it that the offense was terribly the problem. They scored 31 points. They gave up 35. So you got to think about it in that vein as well. Now, the block punt did obviously set up a rather easy score to begin the game. But you just got to take everything into consideration here. Courtney Messingham probably called 3 touchdowns that didn't come to fruition either. When you talk about Skylar Thompson's, missed throws to Sebastian Taylor, Malik Knowles dropped a 50 or 60-yard pass too in the second half. So I do agree that he probably stays stubborn with some of that interior run game, especially when it allows the defense to kind of pour players in the box and maybe you don't have the horses to run that style of run game. I would have liked them to run more out of spread formations and with Deuce Vaughn and hopefully when Jacardia Wright comes back and Trotter and Tyler Burns, I think that kind of spreads the defense out, takes guys out of the box, and I think they've had more success by doing that. So I would like a little bit less stubbornness when it comes to some of that power run game that they, I guess, probably have more success with that at North Dakota State than they have here in Manhattan. So a little bit of both to me. I mean, I guess I can't really crack on him too hard when he's probably thinking to himself a little bit, I called 3 or 4 touchdowns that never saw the light of day.
Very true. And I mean, still, they scored 31 points in the game. You know, I mean, this was not a Kansas putting up 7 points against Coastal Carolina sort of a performance. Alex asked, how do we let our safety depth become so poor that we were playing a converted nickelback and a converted walk-on quarterback? That's kind of more your area with the personnel side of things. There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on there. You know, part of that is, you know, Wayne Jones got hurt. Part of that is Jerome McPherson got hurt. Part of that is Ross Elder was hurt. Part of that is Jonathan Alexander opted out. So there's 3 injuries at least and an opt-out there that really took everything out. You lost both starters today. They got injured during the game. And then the backups, one was already injured and one opted out, you know, a month and a half ago and is back home in Texas. So some of that is out of their control. You say you let it happen. Well, the only other option would be at this point going into the Oklahoma game if McPherson's out, if Wayne Jones out, if Ross Elder is still out. Jonathan Alexander is still opted out, of course. That leaves you with Ryan Hennington. That leaves you with Brock Monty. That leaves you with Tyron Lewis, and those are the only 3 that are brand new to the program and didn't just arrive 2 months ago. And that's Malachi Mitchell and Amaris Brown. When you lose that many scholarship players to opt out an injury, then you're down to a redshirt freshman and 2 true freshmen. The 2 true freshmen did not play safety today. They may have to in 2 weeks in Oklahoma, and I imagine the next 2 weeks are probably getting them up to speed to have them as ready as can be. One of them did play special teams today, so he might be the next man up.
Yeah,
That's
Amaris
Brown from Florida.
Reed asked, did TJ Smith die? Was TJ Smith out there playing?
He played today.
Okay.
He was one of the, I think, culprits, along with Hennington, on the trick play that scored a touchdown for Arkansas State in the first half. So, but we didn't see a lot of him, but he was the backup to Will Jones. I think most of it is because Will Jones probably played 90% of the snaps.
Here's a question. We did talk about this just briefly, but a more specific question about it. Brandon does raise the point here. Why did we not go for a touchdown on our last possession when you had a defense and a kicker that were not playing very well? You had just converted a 4th down and had momentum too. It's absolutely a fair question to bring up what the decision-making would be there. I mean, I thought it was a tough call at the time that it happened. I was looking down the row kind of at Mason and Mitch who were sitting beside me like, all right, what would you guys do here? Like, because you're feeling iffy about Blake Lynch.
Mm-hmm.
You do know that Arkansas State's offense has been moving the ball up and down, and you had already converted 1 4th down. Kleiman already showed that he was going to be very gutsy on that drive with the call earlier. What do you think? Was it the right call?
Yeah, he went for that 4th and 2 that they called timeout, so I thought they were going to back out of it and punt anyway, and then they came back out, still went for it, and I think he threw it to Briley Moore for the 1st down. Gutsy call there. I'm not sure I would have went for it on 4th down in that situation. They were on their own 40, I think, or about there, and they were losing. What was the score at that point? 28-24?
28-21, right? 28-21. I think they were down a touchdown.
Yeah.
At that point.
So I don't think I would have been as gutsy as he was at that point. But opting for a field goal, I don't know if it was the wrong choice, but I think it's a choice that's been consistent with Chris Kleiman and how he typically coaches.
Yeah, you're right, because a thought that I had when he went for it earlier in that drive was like, that's not very consistent with what Kleiman did last year. That was atypical of what we saw. And it was even from us, like complaining about the Baylor and Oklahoma State games last year about being too conservative and kind of playing to keep the score close as opposed to playing to win. I mean, that was a move where he was definitely going more for broke, and so, you know, differing philosophy there. But I would say this, I guess. I think, and I was going to look up here, DY. Do you remember, was it 4th and 2 when that happened, when they kicked the field goal? It was 4th and 2. It was 4th and 2 from the 17. So 4th and 2 from the 17. I think in that situation with the kicker and Blake Lynch, who, yes, had missed 2 field goals today, but also was honorable mention All Big 12 last year and only missed 2 the entire season, was 19 for 21. I think most coaches are kicking it there. I think most coaches would.
You're probably right. And another thing that maybe backs that up is we've had a lot of questions about how porous the offensive line was and how porous the running game was. If you really feel like those 2 things are porous, you probably don't feel great about going for it on 4th and 2 either in that situation. I will say I did get a question and asked, is there an explanation why we had so many guys not dressed today? I'll put it kindly, there's a few injuries, but we're also in the middle of a pandemic, and that's going to be pretty common for every team in the country.
Let's see, I just lost the question I was going to end on here. I believe it was just where does K-State go from here? There we go, Caleb. Caleb asked, where does K-State go from here? You do have a week off, okay, so keep that in mind. You have a week to regroup before Oklahoma. I think some guys are on track to be back. You could speak more to that.
I think you'll see those receivers that were not able to play today. They will be back. And to be honest, so many of the guys that did not suit up today were still on the sideline and in street clothes, and that is a great sign because that means that they have kind of put what they were going through behind them. And really, the only roadblock to them playing today was just not having the conditioning or enough practices under their belt. I think they were probably 1 or 2 practices if they were lucky. So I think it was out of an abundance of caution and care for them because I don't think it would be fair to put an athlete that's probably that out of shape in this competitive of a situation. But that does tell me they're going to be practicing the next 2 weeks and they'll be available for the game in Oklahoma, assuming all goes well between now and then because every day's tricky.
Now let me actually get to the boards here for a couple more. DY, how do you want me to pronounce that name?
SKANC.
Okay. If you knew going into the game that K-State would have a +2 turnover differential and a block punt, how much money would you have put on K-State? A lot.
I would have put,
a lot.
I would have
That's
put,
a good point.
I would have put more than I actually did.
Yeah, you bet the Cats?
I did.
Okay. Biggest surprise of the game, in your opinion?
Biggest surprise of the game would actually...
to me, it's the secondary.
And I guess there's a couple things. Probably as weak as the secondary was, that is a good surprise. I'll say another one. Tyler Burns only had 1 carry.
Good now, Kat. Do you think the offensive line will gel and be an effective unit as the season goes on? I will start by answering and say that I've been pretty bullish on the offensive line. Like, I really believe in Connor Riley, and I think that this has the potential to be a more talented group than what K-State had last year, but today showed that they have a long ways to go, and the problem with this year is going to be how much continuity are you just able to piece together throughout the year. That's going to be the wild card.
My immediate answer would be yes, but I agree that if they're able to consistently have the same personnel available throughout the year, then I think they're going to get much better. But that's going to be tricky to navigate this year. That's the problem. It's hard to develop when guys are probably going to be in and out of availability, and hopefully they're not. Hopefully Kansas State can be really good when the way that they handle this, and everyone is typically available for the entire season. That's just hard to do.
Finally, Oiler Cat 2. Do you think the quick start hurt K-State taking their foot off the gas after being up 21-7?
I don't know that it hurt them because I don't think that they lightened up. I don't think it would. My answer would be no. My answer would be that they got up and it wasn't that they took the foot off their gas. It's that they just didn't play well, and I don't think it had anything to do with mental focus. Some of it had to do with personnel issues.
Yeah, I really didn't. I didn't get that kind of a feel. I really didn't, to be honest, today. Because even at 21-7, it didn't feel like, hey, K-State's out of the woods yet in this game. I didn't get that much of a feeling of that either. I think it was more just Arkansas State was a game team. Now, to be fair, and I heard Stan Weber say this actually after the game, that his turning point of the game, the crucial point of the game to him was the fact that when it was 21-7, Arkansas State hits the trick play.
Yeah.
To make it 21-14, that was a huge play. That was a giant play because if K-State does get a stop there, now all of a sudden you're talking about a much different game. So that was a crucial moment in the game, but I don't think that was K-State taking their foot off the gas. That's Arkansas State probably seeing all the trick plays that K-State gave up last year and knowing that they could hit one of those.
Yeah, and they took advantage of T.J. Smith and Ryan Hennington on that play. So I think it's probably both trick plays because I think Arkansas State put up points on the board because of a fake punt and because of that trick play that ended a touchdown to when it was 21-7. They don't hit those trick plays, and Kansas State's on the winning end probably rather comfortably, despite still not being able to guard Jonathan Adams.
Yeah, and there was also immediately after the fake punt another little reverse pass to the quarterback or whatever that helped set up the touchdown there too. So.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and we're talking about all the what ifs there for Kansas State. How about the what ifs for Arkansas State? They fumbled the ball inside the 10-yard line.
Oh yeah.
They threw an interception to Will Jones that resulted in points for Kansas State. They had a punt block that resulted in points for Kansas State. They missed a field goal. They had a tremendous amount of gaffes too, and I hate saying this. They could have won this game kind of comfortably if they played a mistake-free ball game as well.
Yeah. In the end, feels like it all evened out about the way that it should have. It felt like Arkansas State was a team that deserved to win today, and they did, 35-31. That's all I've got. DY, you have anything else for the people here?
I don't. I will say that I still don't think it's time to hit the nuclear button for anyone. I think there's reasons for concern. My pessimism has probably crept up 3 or 4 notches after this game, and like I said, some of that is just me being a little bit terrified of what is to come in a secondary because I don't know if there's any immediate answers, and I think today probably brought more problems for them than the actual performance did, because now you're probably talking about Wayne Jones not being able to go back to his home state and play in the game at Oklahoma, and if they really need McPherson back.
I will say Wayne Jones was supposedly moving his extremities. That is something that Chris Kleiman said after the game, so hopefully, certainly our thoughts are out with Wayne Jones, and hopefully he is going to be on the road to recovery soon. Big picture perspective, I mean, I'll just add on to what DY said. Like, I guess I was pretty prepared for this kind of a thing. I thought K-State would win, but I thought it would be very close because Arkansas State's a good program that's been to 9 straight bowl games and got the rust knocked off with their first game of the year, and we knew K-State was going to have some issues personnel-wise. I still think Chris Kleiman's a great coach. I still think this program is going to be fine. This team, it's iffy. My pessimism certainly has gone up a couple of notches as well, and there's just so many uncertainties this year with how things are going to play out. But I've seen enough from Kleiman. I think he knows what he's doing. I still believe in this staff and these guys, and so I know it's easy to melt down right now. I would just preach to have some perspective with it. I think you remember last year how bad things felt after Oklahoma State and Baylor. You can kind of work yourself back into, all right, there's reason for hope here. There's reason for hope. I don't think all is lost 1 week into the season.
And if I was a diehard fan, I'd probably feel similar, so I'm not really criticizing.
No. Listen, in the moment, heat of the moment, you just lost a home game to Arkansas State on Fox, national TV. We all wanted to make fun of Iowa State. You can't now because you lost to a Sun Belt team also. I totally get it, man. I do. But I'll just say, last year there was a lot of this too when they came back and did what they did against Oklahoma and won 8 games.
And it doesn't excuse this loss because regardless of what I'm about to say, if you're Kansas State, regardless of what's going on, and I know there's a lot going on at the same time, but they had a lot of starters down too, it's probably, no matter what, an unacceptable loss losing at home to Arkansas State. You can't lose to a Sun Belt team that's down 6 or 7 starters on defense at home. I'm going to agree with you that it is unacceptable. But if I apply a little bit of perspective, and it's not to make anyone feel better, but I think it deserves to be said, as all along, and it's probably something that we forgot and probably allowed to fade away because last year was a little bit of an overachieving kind of season. All along we said year 2 was going to be the tough one.
Yes.
This is year 2. It shouldn't be this tough, though, I would agree.
All right. Great work by Flando behind the camera in his, I believe, Colorado Rockies bucket hat that he's rocking right now. Thank you for all your hard work. For Derek Young, I'm John Kurtz. Is this where someone's supposed to say, tell your friends?
I will say, let us know how you felt about this show and if you wanted to continue. But it probably still will continue, but we want to know how good we did or how much you enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, yes, tell your friends.